So hi and welcome to this live science Q&A session. So you can ask your questions in many ways today and I'll just go through that in a minute. So these are the 4 different ways that you can ask your questions. So you can WhatsApp your questions to +44 7521 501 605. You can tweet your questions to @elevise.uk. You can email your questions to info@elevise.co.uk, or you can comment on this live stream. So we're going to be running these live Q&As twice a week. We're going to be doing mathematics on a Monday at 2 o'clock and then science on a Wednesday again at about 2 o'clock. Each of the live streams will probably last for about 20 minutes to half an hour. Okay, so if you have got any questions for any mathematics or science GCSE content, submit your questions in those 4 ways and then they'll be answered in hopefully the next live Q&A video. So what we're going to be looking at today is science. So we're going to be starting off with biology. We're going to be looking at the different types of cells and what the different subcellular structures do. After this video, it might be worth you writing each of the subcellular structures down and then a little definition as to what they do. All of the content that we're going to discuss in the first part of today's video is going to be for the foundation and the higher course. Okay, so if you are sitting the GCSE course, all of this is going to be relevant. Okay, so let's now have a look at a cell and go through some of the subcellular structures. So here on the screen now we have a cell. What you can see is we've got a few different subcellular structures labelled, and what we're going to look at first is the nucleus. Okay, the nucleus is where all of the genetic material is kept in the cell. Okay, it's essentially kind of like the brain of the cell and it controls what the cell does. It's best not to say that it is the brain of the cell and just say that it contains all of the genetic information, so all of the DNA, genes, chromosomes, and also it controls what the cell does. The nucleus is always the large circular one that's in, well, essentially the cell. Okay, so you're looking for a large circle to be the nucleus. Okay. The next one that we're going to have a look at is the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is a gel-like substance and it's where most of the chemical reactions take place inside the cell. So for this one here, it's pointing to all of this kind of light blue stuff, and that is the cytoplasm. Okay, so the cytoplasm is where all of the chemical reactions take place. The next one we're going to have a look at is ribosomes. And ribosomes are these small little circular kind of little structures within the cell. And the ribosomes are responsible for synthesizing proteins, which means making proteins. An example of some of the proteins that they might make is enzymes. Okay, so enzymes are biological catalysts, and we looked at those in a previous video. We'll maybe have a little look at enzymes again slightly later. Okay, so ribosomes synthesize protein, which means that it makes proteins. Okay, the next one is the cell membrane. The cell membrane is the outside of the cell. What the cell membrane does is it controls what goes in and out of the cell. The cell membrane is partially permeable, and this means that some substances can go in and some substances can go out. So for this cell, this is just a generic cell, but all cells are going to need glucose, and glucose is going to be supplied from the bloodstream, and glucose is going to enter into the cells. Waste products such as carbon dioxide from the respiration reaction are then going to come out of the cell. So they pass through the cell membrane, which is partially permeable. Okay, the final one that we're going to look at for this cell is mitochondria. And mitochondria are these kind of rectangle-like ones, and these are responsible for respiration. You may have heard of these as the powerhouse of the cell, and they're called the powerhouse of the cell because they perform all of these all of the respiration chemical reactions, and that is what gives us energy. The respiration reaction is this. It's oxygen plus glucose. And then that gives us, I'll just move it across slightly, CO2 plus water. And the most important one is energy. Okay, so Mitochondria are known as the powerhouse of the cell and they're where respiration reactions take place. The easiest way to remember this, the respiration reaction, is to think about, what you breathe in is oxygen. So the whole point of breathing air in, which is ventilation, so you're bringing air into your lungs, is to get oxygen. Also, you need to combine that oxygen with glucose, and you get glucose from your food. So remember, you get glucose from your food, and you're breathing in oxygen. The waste products are then carbon dioxide and water. So carbon dioxide you breathe out, and then water is a waste product that goes into the bloodstream and then gets dealt with. Okay, this is aerobic respiration. The reason why it's aerobic is because it has oxygen. So aerobic respiration is with oxygen, and if we had anaerobic respiration, it would just be glucose breaking down to then produce lactic acid. Okay, so aerobic respiration, I'll write it down here. So aerobic is with oxygen. Anaerobic, you can see here, is without oxygen. Okay, so aerobic with, anaerobic without. So you can see for the anaerobic one, there's no oxygen present on the left side of the kind of equation. And then on the right side, we get lactic acid. Lactic acid is what makes your legs kind of burn when you're running up a hill or you're running kind of extremely fast. Okay, so when you're running up a hill, you can't get enough oxygen to all of the mitochondria in your muscle cells, so they start switching from doing aerobic respiration with oxygen, to anaerobic respiration, which is respiration without oxygen. This produces lactic acid, and this is what makes your legs burn. Okay, so I'll just rub all of that out and we'll go back to our cell. So this is our typical kind of human cell, and those are the 5 different ones. I'll just quickly summarize them again. So the nucleus contains all of the genetic information in the cell. It also controls the cell, so it controls what the cell does, etc. Okay, we've then got the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is where most of the chemical reactions take place, and it makes up the majority of the cell. The cytoplasm here is that kind of light blue substance that has the whole cell. Ribosomes, the small circle ones, they're responsible for synthesizing protein, and synthesizing protein means making proteins, and one example of a protein that it might make is an enzyme. The next one, the cell membrane, and that's the outside of the cell. The cell membrane controls what goes into and out of a cell. It's partially permeable, which means that substances can pass through, so you can go into it or go out of it. Partially permeable, so I should just say that again. Permeable means that substances can move between it or move through it. Partially permeable means that only certain substances can move through it. Later on, or you might have already covered it at school, with osmosis, the larger molecules, so the proteins, they're unable to pass through, but the smaller ones, such as water, can pass into and out of the cell. Another example of a large molecule might be like a sucrose molecule or any kind of salt or mineral. Okay, so partially permeable means that certain substances can pass through and other substances cannot pass through. The final one, so number 5, is mitochondria, and these are the powerhouse of the cell. They're where the respiration reaction takes place, and the respiration reaction is oxygen combines with glucose to then give you carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so this is a typical human cell. We're now going to have a look at what a plant cell looks like. So here is one on the screen now. So you can see that it's got everything that our human cell has. So it's got our nucleus there. So that's where all of the genetic material is kept. We've also got our cell membrane here. So that's this line. I'll just go around the outside. So that's this line there. Cell membrane controls what goes into and out of the cell. We've then got mitochondria there. And again, they look exactly the same. So they're the powerhouse of the cell. So they're responsible for respiration. The next one is cytoplasm, and that's where most of the chemical reactions take place. And the final one that we had is then ribosomes, and again, they're responsible for synthesizing proteins and making proteins. We've now got 3 additional ones. So we've got a permanent vacuole hole, we've then got chloroplast, and the final one that I've missed is a rigid cell wall. So we'll look at number 1, which is the vacuole hole first, and the vacuole hole is here. What the vacuole hole is, or we should say permanent vacuole hole, is just a space inside the cell. It's a space inside the cell that contains cell sap, which is a weak solution of minerals and it contains cell sap, which is a solution of kind of minerals, water, salt. Okay, so it's essentially a storage facility. So that's in the center, and for a plant cell, it's permanent, and that means that it's always going to be there. Okay, we now go on to chloroplasts, and chloroplasts are these little kind of green ones. So these green kind of ovally shaped ones here. And what chloroplasts are responsible for is photosynthesis. So how plants get most of their energy, or how they get their energy, is from photosynthesis. The equation for photosynthesis is the reverse of the equation for respiration. So what we found out earlier, I'll put respiration down first. So move it across a little bit more. So we've got respiration here. Remember, what do you breathe in? You breathe in oxygen. You then combine it with glucose, which is what you get from your food. That then gives you CO2 plus water. Okay. What it is for, or what the equation is for photosynthesis, so I just put PHOTO, is just the reverse of this. So it's going to go in that way. So we're going to get water plus CO2. That then gives us oxygen plus glucose. Also what we need to mention is that in order for photosynthesis to take place, we need to have light. Okay, so light is the energy that allows this to take place. So respiration is oxygen plus glucose gives you carbon dioxide and water. Photosynthesis, the reverse of that. So water and carbon dioxide gives you oxygen and glucose. Okay, so it's probably best to remember one of them and then just remember that the other one is just the reverse of that. Some people find it easier to remember respiration, other people find it easier to remember photosynthesis. Okay, but that's totally up to you. Cool. So let's move back across. Okay. Also, it's worth mentioning that plants also respire. So plants just don't solely photosynthesize, they've also got mitochondria, and mitochondria allows the plants to respire. Okay, the final one that we need to mention, so number 3, is just a rigid cell wall, and this goes around the outside of the cell like that. What the rigid cell wall does is it gives essentially the cell the rigidity and structure that it needs. Cool. Okay, so plants have all of the subcellular structures that a typical human cell would have, and then they have 3 more. So these 3 more are a permanent vacuole hole, so that's kind of a storage facility in the center of the cell. It contains a solution of cell sap, which is a solution of water with a few minerals and salts. Another one, or the next one that it has, is chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are responsible for photosynthesis. The final one, a rigid cell wall, and the cell wall, or the rigid cell wall, gives the cell its structure, which then supports the cell. Perfect. Okay, so that's all of those looked at. What we're going to do now is just go on to the periodic table quickly, and then we're going to have a look at one past paper question, which is actually from an AQA higher paper. Okay, so this is the periodic table here, and we're going to have a look at what the different numbers mean. So the bottom number we're told here, that's the atomic number, which is the number of protons that the cell has. Not the cell, the atom has. Okay, so if we were to look at boron, so boron is just here, that bottom number is a 5. And that tells us that boron is going to have 5 protons. All elements are neutrally charged, so it means that if it has 5 protons, it's also going to have 5 electrons. Okay, the top number is the relative atomic mass, and the relative atomic mass for boron is 11. We work out the relative atomic mass by doing the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. In this case, the relative atomic mass is 11, and we had 5 protons, so that means that the number of neutrons is going to be 6. Okay, so we now have all of the information that we've got there, and I think it'll be a good idea if we just put a table down with those 3 different subatomic particles. So I'm just going to put name here. We're then going to have protons, neutrons, and electrons. We're going to have the mass in this column, the charge in this one, and then the final one's then going to be found. So I'll just give you 30 seconds just to fill that in, and then I'll give you the answers for it. Okay, so hopefully that went well. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to do where they're found. And protons and neutrons are found in the nucleus of the atom. The electrons are then found in the shell, so that means they're going to be on the outside of the atom. Now I'm going to look at the mass. And anything that's found in the nucleus or the centre of the atom is going to have a mass of 1. So this means that protons have a mass of 1 and neutrons also have a mass of 1. Anything that's on the shells is going to have a mass that's very negligible, and we're going to call that mass 1 over 2000, which is also known as 0.005. Okay, so either of those are acceptable. The final one to look at is the charge, and for the charge, look at the first letter for each of them. So P, or for protons it's P, and that's going to have a positive charge. Neutrons is N, and N's neutral, so that's going to have a charge of 0. And then finally E, well, it doesn't actually work for this one, but you're going to have 1 positive, the protons, 1 neutron, 1 neutral, the neutrons, and then finally 1 electron. Okay, so there's going to be 1 positive, 1 neutral, and 1 negative. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do now is now have a look at this past paper question. So here we've got, well, I'll just read it out, and this is a higher past paper question. So figure 4 represents 1 molecule of fluorine. Complete the dot and cross diagram on figure 4. You should only draw the electrons in the outer shells. Okay, so fluorine, or in this case the molecule of fluorine, is going to be F2. The reason why I know that's going to be the case is because there's 1 here and then a second one there. Okay, so it's going to be F2. We now need to find where fluorine is in the periodic table, and fluorine is just here. So I'm going to bring that down, and the bottom number is 9 and the top number is 19. Okay, what we need to find out now is the number of protons, neutrons, and electrons, or more specifically, we need to know the number of electrons, but we may as well find all of them out. So the bottom number, which is the atomic number 9, is going to be the number of protons and also the number of electrons. We work out the number of neutrons by doing the top number, which in this case is 19, minus the bottom number 9, which gives us 10. So with fluorine, it has 9 protons, 10 neutrons, and 9 electrons. Okay, with the 9 electrons, these are going to be in shells, and pre this bonding, I'm just going to draw what fluorine would look like. Okay, so fluorine's going to be here. On the first shell, we can have 2 electrons, so those are the 2 electrons there. We know that fluorine needs 9 in total. Okay, so it's already got 2, needs 9 in total, so it needs 7 more on this diagram. The second shell can take 8 electrons. So this means we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've now got all 9 of our electrons on fluorine. So when we've got bonding, we've got 2 different types of bonding. We've got ionic bonding and covalent bonding. Ionic bonding is when a metal and a non-metal kind of give or receive electrons and bond. Covalent bonding is when 2 non-metals share electrons. Okay, so what they do, or what atoms do, is they react with one another, or essentially bond with one another, to then get a full outer shell. For fluorine, it needs one more to then get this full outer shell. And for this one here, because you've got that part of the diagram, whereby you've got a crossing of those 2 circles, it tells us that this is going to be covalent bonding. With covalent bonding, each of the fluorines, or each of the atoms, need to put in the number of electrons that they need to gain. So with our fluorines, with the one on the left, it needs to gain 1, so it needs to put 1 in the sharing pile, and the one on the right also needs to put 1 into that sharing. Okay, so currently for fluorine on the left, we've got 1 electron there and then 2 electrons there. Okay, originally it had 7 in its outermost shell, so that then means that we've got to put another 5 on the outside shell. Okay, so if we were just to check if it did have 7 of its own, we would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's all looking good for that fluorine. Okay, we now need to do the same for the one on the right, and with the one on the right, all of its electrons are going to be dots. So we need to have 7 on its outermost shell. We've got 1 here, a second here, so 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, perfect. So we've now got 7 on its outermost shell. I'll just get rid of that 1 and 2. So if we just wanted to check that these were happy, we can count that it's got 8, or we can count for each of the molecules that it's got 8 in its outermost shell. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that one's good because it's all happy because it's got 8. Let's do this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, that one on the right, so fluorine on the right, now got 8. So that one's happy as well. Okay, so both of these fluorines are happy. Good. So I'm now going to get us to have a look at O2. So O2 is 2 oxygens, and again we're just going to do the outermost shells like that there, and I might just do it a little bit more. So let's have a look at the periodic table, and when we look at it, we see that oxygen is there. So if I just bring it across, we're going to have O, and then it's going to be C. Whoops, it was 8 and 16, so O, 8 and 16. So if we put P and E down here, again the only one we really care about is the electrons. So the bottom number 8 is going to be the number of protons and electrons. The number of neutrons is going to be 16 minus 8, which gives us 8. So oxygen has 8 protons, 8 neutrons, and 8 electrons. Okay, so what we can see here is it's going to have 2 in its first shell and then 6 in its second. So kind of the configuration will be 2 and 6. That second shell is 2 off being full. Okay, so it's 2 off having a full outer shell. So what it needs to do is share 2 electrons. Okay, so the ones that it shares then goes in that kind of middle part, the overlap, and that's the sharing part for the covalent bonds. Okay, we're told that it had 6 in its outermost shell, so it shared 2. So that then means that it's going to have like another 4 on its outside that's not in the sharing pile. Okay, we're now going to look at what it's going to be like for this oxygen here. And again, it needs to gain 2, so it needs to put 2 in. It's then going to have those original 4 then on the outside. Okay, so both of them originally had 6 in its outermost shell. I'm just going to check that when we go around and count that they've now both got 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good. So that one on the left is happy. Let's now check the right. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that one also has 8. So that's happy too. Okay, perfect. So that's that. Well, you can see there you've got oxygen, or like that's how O2 looks. Sometimes this here is known as a double bond. So you might see oxygen sometimes written as O with like 2 dashes across to O. Cool. With fluorine, because we only had one covalent bond, you may see this written as just FF, that one just indicating the one bond. Right, so the next part of the question then states this. So a fluorine atom can be represented as 919F. What is the total number of electrons in a fluorine molecule F2? So we've already found out that in one fluorine molecule there's 9, and in one fluorine atom there's 9, and if we've got 2 of them, it just means that we're going to have 2 lots of 9, so it would just be 2 times 9, which will then just give us 18. Okay, right, now let's go on to the... Okay, so that brings us to the end of this kind of live stream for today. So hopefully you've found it useful. We're going to be running these twice a week, like I mentioned earlier. So there's going to be maths on a Monday at 2, and then science every Wednesday. Okay, you can then submit your questions in 4 different ways, and these 4 different ways are shown on the screen now. So you can WhatsApp your questions to that number. You can tweet them to @EleviseUK. You can email your questions to info@elevise.co.uk. You can comment on, well, the final method would be comment on this live stream, but you can only do that when we are live. Okay, so for more resources, go on to elevise.co.uk and you can get more maths and science resources.